G'day, Dave here, and welcome to the end of Ecclesiastes. We're arrived at chapter 12. This is the final section. Pick it up with me at verse 9. Not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and he searched out and he set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. I imagine that, like me, as you've read through this book of Ecclesiastes, you really have marveled at the language, marveled at these clever proverbs that are just so perceptive about life. Maybe you've been enticed by the descriptions of life that you've said, yes, that's it. He's nailed it. That's the way that it is. Well, the teacher has gathered all this together, not for academic purpose, but to promote action. This isn't philosophy. It's not for academic kind of theoretical reading. This is intended to move us forward, to send us in a particular direction. And he goes on in verse 11 to say, the words of the wise are like goads. Their collected sayings are like firmly embedded nails. Now, a goad was a stick that you'd use to hit an animal to get it to go in a particular direction. You might have heard of these being used with bullock carts and the oxen that are pulling along the carts, and that they'd use whips, but they'd also use goads. And in the case of, say, animals with very thick skin, like an elephant, you might want nails in the goad so as to be able to prick it and prod it to make it move in this way. And what he's saying basically is quite a simple message. These words are to goad us into action. They are eliciting a response. What are we going to do as we read this? And then he goes on to say that these words, these wise words that are to goad us into action, are given by one shepherd. Now, in the Bible, you get descriptions of shepherds. The kings are sometimes described as shepherds watching over the people. Some of Israel's leaders in Ezekiel are described as shepherds taking care of their flock. But the one true shepherd ultimately is God himself. He is the good shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, and he is the one who guides us to pastures that are green. See, these words are words that are ultimately, whether it's Solomon or whether it's another writer or whether it's just some wise man we know nothing about, these words are ultimately from God. God has written to us through whoever it may be here to bring about change in our lives. But there's a warning. He says, be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Now, I've always believed that last bit. You can't study too much or you'll just get worn out. What's he saying though? I think he's saying we need to act. So you can keep on studying. You can keep on researching. You can open yet another blog post. You can open another podcast. You can open another article. You can open another book. You can read and read and research and read and do nothing. No, that just wearies the body. The purpose of these words is that we might respond. And here is the response. You can see it in verse 13. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Now, this is a massive ending. He's taken us on journey after journey after journey through this book of Ecclesiastes. We've looked at happiness, we've looked at grief, we've looked at wisdom, we've looked at foolishness, we've looked at life, we've looked at death, we've looked at all sorts of things. And he keeps coming up with the same refrain again and again. Havel, Havel, everything is Havel, utterly Havel. My version here, the NIV, translates Havel as meaningless. And there is a futility associated with that. But ultimately, this is a word that means a mist or a vapor. The key idea is that things are temporary. And ultimate meaning is not found in the temporary, but in the eternal. And once you come to know the eternal, so it should lead to a transformed life. And he's saying here that the way forward, the true way of wisdom, you can read about it in every one of the wisdom books, is that the way to wisdom is through the fear of the Lord. That is, recognise God is your creator. God has made you and he will call you to account. He will bring every deed to judgment. God is the one that we should bow down before. He's the one that we should fear. He's the one that we should hold in awe and reverence, because he is the one who will bring us to judgment. Now that on its own is not a particularly happy ending, is it? We're told that no, everything is not temporary, because there will be a day when God will bring judgment. And so therefore we should fear God. But if it is only to be a day of judgment, sure, fear, terror, there is nothing else for us to do. Because deep down we all know that if we were to stand before God in judgment and God was to hold us to account for every thought and word and deed, for everything that we have done and everything that we haven't done, we would suffer on that day massively. But God has come to bring a word, to bring a gospel of salvation. And I want to finish this, not in Ecclesiastes, but by taking you to the implications of things not being havel, things not being temporary. Because the New Testament finds its foundation in the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus Christ, who came back from the dead and who now offers a relationship with God, a hope of relationship with God for all eternity. That's what we now look forward to if we're trusting in Jesus. And so there is no longer havel at that point. Things are no longer a mist and then they're gone. No, they are permanent. They're enduring. They're eternally life. And so on one occasion, the Apostle Paul, he's kind of in Athens and he sees a whole bunch of statues and tributes to different gods. And so he wants to declare to them the implication of there being one true God. And the evidence, the kind of fixed point that he goes to is the resurrection of Jesus. On another occasion, Paul said, if there's no resurrection, then I may as well just go and eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow I die and that's it. But he believes in the resurrection. He's met the resurrected Jesus. And so he preaches the resurrection. I'm going to read these words from Acts 17, verse 29. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we shouldn't think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man that he has appointed, and he's given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. And at that Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed, and among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, and also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. Friends, in the light of the resurrection claims, in light of the message that there is hope to be found through trusting in the Jesus who died for you and was raised again, what we have here are the three potential responses, I think. One is to sneer, to dismiss, just to dismiss it. I mean, Jesus didn't come back from the dead. Dead people don't rise. There isn't evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. I'm just going to do what I want. That's one response. Another response is to say, well, I'd actually like to hear you again on this topic. I'd like to explore a bit further. And if you're open to digging into this, then please, open up the Bible, turn to the New Testament, read the accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, read about Jesus. Discover that God has come into our world in Jesus to offer us a hope for all eternity. Suss it out. Get into it. You can find out online that there are courses on Christianity Explained, Christianity Explored, Discovering Life, Introducing God, a whole range of courses, Investigating Christianity. Or maybe you know somebody in a church. Perhaps you could speak to them and say, do you mind if I come along to your church? And find out if it's one that really believes in the death and the resurrection of Jesus. But among them, there are some people who became followers. they believe this message. And I want to ask you, as I finish this series on Ecclesiastes, do you know enough to put your trust in Jesus? Because if you are sitting on that and you recognize that, yes, Jesus has come to die for you, that his death pays the price for your sin, that he's offering you forgiveness, that God has raised him again from the dead so that he's alive today and you can trust him and you can follow him, and that through trusting in him you can have life forevermore, then why don't you take that step? Today would be a great day to put your trust in Jesus. And I want to encourage you to pray three things. To apologise to God, to say that you're sorry for treating him as though he didn't matter. Secondly, to say please. To ask God to forgive you. To ask God to welcome you into his family. To ask God to change you. And thirdly, to say thank you. Thank you to God for sending Jesus to die in your place and to be raised again. If you come to the point where you know that's the step you need to take, let me encourage you to pray a prayer of sorry, of please, of thank you.